So we've now looked inside Google Shopping. It's time to consider exactly what the European Union has to say about it. The statement of objections is not public, but they do have a press release that discusses it, and so that's what we're looking at, or fact sheet as they call it. Here's what they say. They say, look, it's not clear that when people run a search, they're seeing the most relevant response. Well, if I say you're not entitled to that, what I mean by that is Google's allowed to show basically as much advertising as the market will sustain. And if you look at lots of advertising and you don't like that, then use an alternative search engine. Go Bing it, or DuckDuckGo it. There are all alternatives out there. What the EU is going to have to articulate here is some vision of how much advertising they can use. Again, the Google Shopping product is clearly at this point an advertising product, so there's no confusion, I think, on that. So the volume of advertising versus the volume of organic responses, and then the prominence of those. So that's what the European Union is going to have to articulate. Now what they say is, which is just so true, is that Google's desktop market share in the European Union, country by country, is around 90%. Tends to be in the 67% range in the United States. So there's always been this sense that on the desktop at least, and I say that because think about smartphones, but on the desktop at least, Google has an extraordinary position in Europe, and that's clearly right. All right. The statement of facts goes through and says, okay, here are our sort of 5 concerns. The bold here you see is actually done by the European Union, not my bold, their bold. So again, this idea of search bias, prominence and emphasis of Google products regardless of merits. And again, that's to say that the ads are very prominent, and they clearly are. Google penalizes other shopping websites, they say, because Google wants cites organic results that are not just a bunch of ads. Okay, they don't do that to the Google product. No, indeed they don't. That's accurate. Preferences matter. And again, the European Union's seen much more information than I have. So Google's first shopping product was something called Frugal. Okay, I get it. Frugal, you don't want to spend a lot of money. I'm not frugal, I'm cheap. Frugal's the nice word, I'm just cheap. Okay, but frugal, and you get the spin on the word frugal and Google, I get all that. Didn't work very well, wasn't very successful. Now, Google gets to evolve its products too, just like everyone else does. But the European Union claim, preliminary sense based on the evidence they've seen so far is that creating the shopping product and putting these advertisements prominently has actually mattered, right? Okay, that could easily be. And then this conclusion, a negative impact on consumers and innovation. Well, that's to say that other comparison sites may not invest as much, given that, and we're going to have to try to sort that a little bit. As I indicated in the last set of slides, last segment, it's not as if you enter a site name in particular you don't get there. It's not if you enter the notion you don't get there. The real fight is when someone enters a particular product. That's a point where they seem to be shopping for something. And the question is, what responses do they see there? Well, okay, if you thought that was a problem, what would you do about it? And to its credit, the European Union addresses that directly in the statement of facts. Treat its own comparison shopping service and those of its rivals in the same way. So now figuring out what that means a little bit is hard. Should Google say, okay, the shopping results we're offering at the top, we're going to treat that as an advertisement location that people can bid on. So Nextag can bid on that if they want to and will bid on that. Google in that situation will be bidding prices that it would pay to itself. You can see how running that kind of actual auction would be complicated. If Google was spending a lot of time bidding in its own auctions, that would raise its own set of issues and its own controversies. If they're saying all of that needs to be done as organic results and not done as advertising, well, that's a different claim, really. a claim about the volume of advertising that Google can engage in and the division between organic and advertising. Again, it's going to be interesting to see how the European Union articulates what the idea is there. Now, offer what's most relevant. Well, what's most relevant, and this really goes back to our look at Brin and Page's paper in 1998, this question about whether there's a conflict between the incentives of advertisers and the incentive of a website that needs to monetize. Google is not in the business of providing necessarily the most relevant result. Google is in the business of showing people ads. That's the media company they are. That's how they make their money. Now, this idea of treating Google's properties as they do outsiders, that's not a new idea, I should say. American executives spend a certain amount of time in Washington testifying in front of Congress. Eric Schmidt, who was, I guess, executive chairman of Google, CEO in the past, executive chair, in 2011, went in to testify in Congress before the Senate Judiciary Committee. They got some follow-up questions, and Schmidt talked about this very idea, where he says, look, we have Google properties. YouTube was one of them, that they treat exactly as they do outside properties. They don't preference it somehow. Well, there is that top link, as we've seen. But they crawl, index, and rank it. And so what the European Union is suggesting there as to actual content properties might be fine. How that concept applies to advertising properties, to advertising and Google Shopping, I think that's the piece of it which I think is much, much harder. Since after all, putting up ads is the media business that Google is in. I think it's even worse than that, though, in the following sense, and we'll see it in the next segment. So Google's shopping product, wow, when you think about and step back about Google, what is Google? That seems like a pretty small piece of Google. How important is it? How does it compare to the rest of the online shopping world? Google responded immediately when the statement of objections came out, and that's what we're going to look at in the next segment. I'm Randy Picker at the University of Chicago. This is Internet Giants, the Law and Economics of Media Platforms.